Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the sixth session in track one, where we'll hear from Olivia Wikle and Evan Williamson at the University of Idaho, and Kate Thornhill and Gabriele Hayden at the University of Oregon on Learn-STATIC, innovative digital humanities pedagogy with static web technologies. My name is Jeremiah, and I'll be the conference committee member moderating this session. Before I hand things over to our presenters, I just want to quickly point out that we'll answer questions at the end of the session, but you can submit your questions at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. If you don't see that bar, you should be able to make it appear by hovering your cursor at the bottom of the Zoom screen. There's also a chat button there that you can use for comments or discussion, or if you're having some tech issues. But please use the Q&A button for asking questions. And again, we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. And so with that, I will pass things on to our presenters.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I'm Olivia Wikle, and we're going to talk to you today about our project Learn-STATIC. So Learn-STATIC is a suite of static web tools for creating free and low maintenance and really sustainable digital humanities web projects. We're going to explain to you today the philosophy and the benefits behind approaching digital humanities projects this way. And we're also going to present our activities from our current NEH, or National Endowment for the Humanities, Digital Humanities Advancement Grant, which is funding this project. So this grant is a collaboration between the University of Idaho and the University of Oregon. And here with me today to share our activities are Evan Williamson, my colleagues Kate Thornhill and Gabriele Hayden. So I'm going to turn it over to Evan now to explain static web.
Yeah, so also I just want to mention Devin Becker is also part of the project team, but I'm not presenting today. So yeah, let's take a step back. What is the static web? Many people who have used the web in teaching are probably more familiar with dynamic websites such as WordPress, Drupal, or other content management systems. In dynamic sites, when a user visits a link, the server does a bunch of processing. It queries a database, it combines all that data with some templates, and then finally serves up a web page into your browser. In contrast, static websites are just made out of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, plain text files that are just sitting on a server, and they're delivered directly to you, to your browser, to the user's browser, without any of that server-side processing and without any databases. So in other words, dynamic sites use server-side processing to render a page after a user navigates to it, whereas a static site, every page is already rendered before a user visits it. Now, since static sites don't need that database and server-side programming language, this really greatly simplifies your infrastructure, meaning that even a very minimal web server or lots of free hosting services can provide you with really high performance for your users and scale to any number of users. And because the site content is made up of these standards-based plain text files, accessibility is relatively easy in comparison to dynamic applications, and the content is all preservation ready for your archives. So yep, a lot of folks are using static web approaches already to create unique digital scholarship projects of all kinds. There's some frameworks out there such as Wax or Collection Builder that are powered by static site generators such as Jekyll, Hugo, or Gatsby. And what Learn-STATIC wants to show is that beyond being this viable option for some unique DH projects in general, these methodologies behind static web development are really well suited for enhancing DH pedagogy and really open up some unique possibilities in your teaching. So we think static sites are really great for the classroom for a number of different reasons. So sustainable, the minimal infrastructure means that you can spend less of your time setting up infrastructure, doing long-term maintenance, and worrying about the security on these platforms. Static sites are just more sustainable and match that reality of having this short period of active work on a project followed by zero maintenance and attention. It's reusable and really customizable because they're using these standards-based plain text formats. The content and the data are just more reusable, enabling the customization and adaptation to the aims and to your context. And the code is out there, it's open, and it's really doable once you learn a few of the skills. Transferable skills are really important, and this is kind of one of the main focuses here. Is static sites don't have that GUI admin interface that you might be familiar with if you've used a content management system like WordPress or say Omeka. This might be intimidating at first, but we really see that as an opportunity to teach fundamental web and data skills that build up your digital literacies rather than simply teaching some buttons and forms of some specific platform. This really helps demystify the web and data and code for students and instructors, and it provides some really essential experiences for the students who might not otherwise be exposed to any of these concepts in their curriculum, in the humanities especially. So learning is really central to this project, and Learn-STATIC really aims to make it easier for the students, but also really aiming to make it easier for the instructors to understand and incorporate the possibilities of static web-powered approaches in the classroom.
So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of our grant activities here so you get an idea of what we're doing. Our grant timeline is, it started in September 2021 and it goes to the end of August 2022. So we're just over the halfway point. And a little bit more about our team. We're 3 digital librarians and collaborating with 3 history faculty at the University of Idaho. And then at the University of Oregon, we have 2 digital librarians, 1 education librarian, and 1 English faculty member that are collaborating. And we're collaborating on these series of project outputs. So they include these foundational learning modules, which we're going to explain to you in a second, a workshop template, and 4 learning sequences. And we are simultaneously creating and revising and testing out all of these learning materials by teaching them in classes this spring. And this has been really, really helpful for getting immediate feedback from students and instructors. So we started the development a lot of it last fall, but then having this iterative experience, getting it in the classroom has been really helpful. And we're going to incorporate that feedback back into the project outputs before we send out our materials to our advisory board in just a couple months here in May. And after the advisory board looks at it in June, we're going to hold we're calling it a summer convening, which is the members of the grant are going to meet for a couple of days. And we are going to discuss the learning materials that we've produced. We're going to talk about our learning experience, our teaching experience and our learning experience. And we're going to talk about any revisions that we think need to be made before we release all of these materials for public use by the end of August.
All right. So the 5 foundational learning modules are on-ramps for learning basic concepts and skills that are prerequisites to creating a static web project using the static site generator and deploying the site on GitHub pages. So we have 5: GitHub, HTML or CSS, Markdown, data concepts, and computational methods. So each module is a GitHub repository that contains instructions for a 30-minute activity that introduces the basics of a primary skill that's used when creating and editing static websites. So for example, the Introduction to GitHub module walks students through the basic elements of GitHub, but just those basic elements the students need in order to do basic collaboration and stand up a GitHub pages. So for example, we don't really talk at all, almost at all, about the way that GitHub is built on Git, which is open source software for version control, which is really essential to Git, but is not really essential to just the basics of getting a static site up and running. So we're really trying to be judicious about not overloading people. The modules are designed to be fully asynchronous and self-contained, and we hope you'll check them out. They're very much in a draft state, so be kind. I'm putting a link in the chat. Feel free to explore them and to offer feedback. You can write us directly, or you can use a GitHub issue if you are deep in the nerd weeds and familiar with that way of going about things. So the modules are designed to be self-contained. Some of them require understanding or skills taught in the other modules. For example, the GitHub skills taught in the first GitHub module are really a prerequisite for the way that you'll interact with GitHub on the other modules. But if you just are used to interacting with GitHub, there's not like something that you built in the first one that you have to bring over to subsequent ones. If you know the material, that's good enough. And instructors can pick and choose which of the modules they need. So they might use a couple, or they might integrate all 5 into a course. And instructors can assign the modules as asynchronous activities, and they're designed to be fully asynchronous, or they can easily modify the activities to be used in a live classroom. And so, for example, I'll be teaching a live Zoom-based version of this workshop. And before the end of this workshop, I'm going to put the link in. Community members are welcome to join. So we would love to see any of you in that workshop. By the end, you'll have a sample demo website set up. So if you ever wanted to feel smart and nerdy, this is your moment. So we're testing, as part of that, I'm testing out the modules. And it's really interesting, just even though we had a really strong vision at the beginning, it's been interesting to see the experience of integrating it into the project. You know, things that, one of the things that I really love is that the material is really modifiable, so that I'm able to pull out and copy, for example, the repository on Markdown, and I'm just going to modify it in very slight ways so that it says specifically what I want you to do in my project, right, versus the general project that it's set up for. And it's really set up for that kind of flexibility. All right.
Okay. So the other output that we're developing are learning sequences, and you can think of a learning sequence as sort of a toolkit or a teaching kit. It consists of 3 parts: a project code template in a repository on GitHub, a demo project website, and a website containing documentation, not only for students, but also sample lesson plans and assessment methods for instructors, who are the ones that are incorporating this project into their classroom. So we emphasize the documentation and this emphasis on instructors as well as students, because we want this approach to be accessible to beginners, no matter what where they're meeting us from. So for instructors, we're providing resources if they want to know more about the approach, along with these sample lesson plans, in order to make it easier to conceptualize bringing these tools into their classrooms. And then, of course, they are welcome to modify them and use them in their own context, however they see fit. The lesson plans are just to get them started and just to get them thinking about it. And then I wanted to mention, before we start talking about our individual projects, for our learning sequences, we've taken as our starting point other current static web DH tools, which we've also developed, including Collection Builder for creating digital collections and digital exhibits, and oral history as data for coding and visualizing oral histories. And now I'll turn it over to Evan to talk about digital collections.
Okay. Yeah, so the first learning sequence is digital collections. We imagine this is a module designed to provide students with an experience of creating and actually curating their own digital collection, or as a group, to give them a more critical understanding of the metadata and the digitization that goes into digital libraries, and just understanding how these aggregations work. So the experience can be framed in a whole lot of different ways, depending on how you want to focus the work that students are going to do and what they're going to be learning. So you could focus it on the digitization and the metadata, or you could go all the way into creating multimodal essays and thinking about how you publish in the web. So currently, current status is that we are piloting it at U of I in a history course. They started off by doing some physical archival research. They took the items that they selected and did some digitization. And then they did research and curation of items out of our existing digital collections, and then wrote up all the metadata for all those items to build a final digital collection that's shared amongst all the students. So I, as a librarian, did all the setup of the digital collection, so that the students' work is really just focused on working in spreadsheets, thinking about that metadata and the digitization, and then it's all collaboratively pulled together into a shared spreadsheet, which will generate their digital collection. And then they can use this research experience in their research papers, using all this evidence that they found, being able to cite that and link to that collection. So this is really an opportunity to teach some of these essential history research skills, getting into the archives, both digital and physical, to do that kind of research that's fundamental to their field, while they're also learning some data literacies, working with spreadsheets that many of them have never done, and having that critical understanding of how metadata and these curated aggregations that we create impact their research and the discoverability of these items. So, and then in the by process, we're also creating a unique, cool digital collection that's going to persist after the course. So you can already check out the link there to see what the project looks like right now. Their metadata isn't incorporated in because they still have another week to turn it in. But all of the documentation for the steps of the project is built into this collection, so you can check it out there.
And then the next learning sequence is the digital project recovery. So a digital project recovery teaches students to build a digital collection using community source data while emphasizing the preservation and reusability of that data. So this is happening at the University of Oregon this spring term with an English 470 text and Texas capstone course, where undergraduate and graduate students will be working with metadata descriptions and images and documents representing digitized and born digital archival materials that have been collected from the Lane County of Governments, the Lane Council of Governments, the Lane County History Museum and the Historic Oregon newspapers, as well as the University of Oregon Scholars Bank. These archival materials were photographed and described by a community nonprofit organization called Beyond Toxic, in conjunction and in collaboration with Professor Maddie Burkett at the University of Oregon. But Beyond Toxic is a nonprofit that provides leadership to build a more community-driven environmental justice movement for having a thriving and a just state of Oregon. So students are going to be learning how to clean up a data set that has been compiled by Beyond Toxic in a previous course that Professor Burkett led. It was a 200 level English course. The students are going to be using Google Sheets to learn the importance of applying foundational data concepts and the importance of a data dictionary and how to apply it to the data set that they're going to be enhancing and cleaning up. The data dictionary was developed by myself and Maddie Burkett, and the guide is going to be used by students in their class to fix and remove any corrections, any data that's been incorrectly formatted or duplicated or incomplete at the item level. By the end of this class, the students are going to be able to also use Markdown to contextualize these historical materials, as well as create a website using Collection Builder for Beyond Toxic to use for their outreach and advocacy efforts in Lane County. So ultimately, the emphasis is going to be placed on the importance of data dictionaries and data documentation, and teaching students how to do item level metadata that follows a standard. And so that's all I've got for that one. So next slide. So the next learning sequence is happening at the University of Idaho. This is digital oral histories. So the purpose of digital oral histories is going to be to teach students to encode and transcribe oral histories as data file and visualize its content. Its current status is that UI is working with a history professor to prepare the content of this course, which will be taught to undergrad students on the 1960s in fall 2022. Students in this course will be asked to conduct an oral history interview with a person who was alive in the 1960s. Then they're going to transcribe that interview and format it in Google Sheets. They'll then be tagging subjects in the interviews and uploading the spreadsheet as a CSV to the class's GitHub Pages website. While also automatically producing a web page for each transcript and a visualization of the interview's subjects. Throughout this process, students will learn data management and markdown skills, and how to qualitatively encode oral histories and how to collaborate on GitHub. UI has received some pretty good feedback from their experiences teaching students to prepare oral histories in this way in the past, and look forward to creating documentation that can help others in this method for their classroom practices.
Okay, and our last project is text analysis. And right now I'm working with an undergraduate history course at the U of I whose focus is on 20th century American history. And I'm developing this learning sequence that invites students to visualize topic modeling run on 20th century State of the Union addresses and political party platforms, and then incorporate those visualizations, that exploration into a multimedia essay, along with other primary sources such as images and PDF documents. So this is a semester-long asynchronous remote course. So the documentation has had to be pretty robust in order to meet all of these students and get them working with GitHub when most of them had no background with it. And halfway through, we're seeing pretty promising results. Students have been able to create a GitHub Pages website successfully. They've been able to already produce drafts of their multimedia essays, and they've been using some really great primary source material from places like Library of Congress or Chronicling America. And they're beginning, I can tell they're beginning to think about text as data as they start to explore their topic modeling and voyant visualizations and think about incorporating those into their essays. So feedback has been mostly positive by this point. Many who were trepidatious at first now are getting a little bit more comfortable reading and writing in this web medium. So that brings us to our conclusion. We just wanted to give you a really brief overview. As we finish up our grant, all of the learning sequences, all of those foundational modules and the documentation will be made openly available on our GitHub organization. It already is openly available. As Gabriele showed the link, things are just looking a little messy right now because we're only halfway through. But we encourage you to check out our work and get in touch with us. We really see a lot of promise in using static web tools for sustainability and teachability for digital humanities projects. And we think the tools that we're creating are going to lower the barriers of entry for people who want to use these tools, but just don't know where to start. So feel free to browse our work so far, and please do get in touch if you have feedback. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes. I don't see anything in the Q&A as of yet or in the chat. We'll just wait a little bit and see if anything comes to mind for folks.
I just was going to clarify for the current digital collection project isn't actually in the Learn-STATIC organization. This is kind of, so we did it as an instance for the specific class. And then the idea is that, and with all of these, we're kind of working with a real class, and then we hope to kind of take a step back from that and make it a more generic template that could be reused easily by other folks. And so once I finish with this class, the digital collection module will go into the Learn-STATIC organization. You'll be able to find it there, and it'll be a little bit more generic than the current, specific to this class version of it that's out there.
Well, I know that this is kind of a sleepy time of day in any conference, and particularly a Zoom conference. So thank you for still being on the chat. And maybe while we're waiting for other people's ideas to percolate in their mind, I'll just ask my colleagues if there's anything that surprised you in the process, and then and then Devin has a question.
our collaborator Devin is in the audience and wanted to make sure that we give Olivia some kudos because she did a tremendous amount of work on creating an awesome text analysis that was, really not something we had done before in this template. So it was a pretty impressive amount of work that she did on that. So do explore that.
Yeah, show us, Olivia.
Yeah, I can show real quick. Gabriele, to get to your, let me find an example. To get to your question, though, I can also speak to that because I've been teaching to a class that is not a digital history class, and I was a little bit nervous about how well they would take the assignment to have to create a website. But I've been pleasantly surprised by how well they have taken it on and been able to work just in really small increments since the beginning of the semester to create websites. And their website looks a lot like what I'm showing you right now. The history professor who's teaching this course and I worked to clean up and get some text ready for topic modeling. We actually ran the topic modeling ahead of time and then just presented them with topics that they needed to label. And we set up the GitHub repository to work so that when they label a topic, once the GitHub Pages site regenerates, they get this page that contains those topics visualized over time. So these are 20th century State of the Union addresses, and these are topics that the instructor and I labeled just as to kind of get their creativity flowing. This is the demo website. So this is our Labor in America topic that we found. And we can see, when it is appearing, who's talking about it the most over time. American economy is here, and America as world power. So you can kind of hover over the little line graph and see. And then this pink text down here allows the students to just copy it. It's using the include liquid templating language that we use with our static websites. So once a student copies it, they can go on the back end of their site to their markdown file, and they're all creating these final essays. They practice in their essay in progress, they create their final essay, and they can paste that little pink snippet of code into the markdown file. And once their site regenerates, then that's not working right. Then the line graph will appear on their essay, so they can actually embed it into their text, use it as a support for what their argument is, and do that really easily compared to using other topic modeling tools for visualization. So it's gone pretty well so far.
And I wanted to answer Gabriele's question as well. Something that's been really exciting and also pleasantly surprising. So on my side of the house with professional development and learning, this is the first time working as a librarian with static site generators, with thinking about pedagogy in mind. And so often there's this mythology around GitHub is for computer scientists and programmers, and the amount of times now where I've been able to just install it on my own, and now it's second nature. And it's just I don't want to use the word easy because easy is different for every person, but coming from the land of Omeka, like many of us, I'm just dang, this is a lot easier, and it's going to be a lot easier to migrate collections and exhibits in the future. And so having that skill set has been phenomenal, and being able to take this opportunity for professional development and be able to bring it back to the DH community at UO has opened a lot of gates in terms of teaching web and data literacies on campus. So for example, I was doing a research consultation the other day with a graduate student who was using Collection Builder for her thesis. And, I was this is going to take 10 minutes to set up, trust me. And we did. We set up Collection Builder in 10 minutes. And she literally said to me, I thought it would be so much work where I would have to go into command line and learn how to use learn how to really code hardcore and like get into the guts. And I was just like, you could someday, but you don't have to for your project. Trust me. Like, it's spreadsheets and knowing how to set up GitHub and just understanding the overall, like, how this thing is structured. And just like big shout out to the UI folks for making really, really good documentation for an open source tool, because that is usually one of the biggest hangups with open source communities of there's no documentation, or you have to figure out your own and have to make it yourself. And so I think that's something that's extremely valuable that the team at UI and this grant is bringing to our broader community, especially in the Pacific Northwest, when like preservation is a big issue for us, because this is not something that just could be used in DH. It could be used in special collections and archives like wild across the state. And so anyway, just wanted to share that, like, things I've learned and like impacts and at the local and also like bigger level.
I think that does a good job of bringing up to one of our keywords that we didn't bring, I don't think anyone said yet, is scaffolded learning, where, you know, we try to make it, there's like an easier on-ramp to get started. But the amazing thing about the static web in these kind of templates is that really you can take full ownership over it. If you spent a week learning it, you would be able to do it yourself. Whereas if you set up Omeka, I don't think you would, you know, modify the base of Omeka yourself in the end. It would take a lot longer. You'd probably be a computer science student. But so that's one of the kind of neat and exciting parts about teaching with this is yeah, that if people like it, they can really take ownership over it and learn some cool skills.
Yeah, it's also just reasonably intuitively designed, right? So you can go in. I was wanting to change something and trying to think about how do I do this, and just following the clues, like the code is sort of self-documenting. There's also a lot of really nice documentation within the code of the collection builder website. And then I changed the thing I wanted, and then I went back to you all's documentation and was like, oh, it explained it right. You knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was able to figure it out myself because the code was so self-documenting. And if I had started with the documentation, it would have just walked me through it. So it's really nice.
Okay, well, we've reached time, so thank you very much for sharing with us today, Olivia, Kate, Gabriele, and Evan. Our next session, session 7, will begin in about 8 minutes. You're currently in track 1. If you would like to go to track 2, I am now going to put that into the chat. So we will see everyone back in 8 minutes or so.
Thank you.